Hello there. Welcome again to another Talk Architecture podcast episode, part 3, or the concluding episode on the series with the title The Magic Formula for Success, or the Success Formula, that is based on a 3-year degree in architecture. What it says there is that you don't need 2 more years for Masters of Architecture, as mentioned and deliberated in a number of podcasts before. It started with the artificial intelligence idea with architecture. And it started with an investigation that architecture, as we know it traditionally and conceived in the last century, is numbered in terms of relevance in society. It has to change. And rooted in that change is architecture education. And of course, we don't like change. We don't like to, have to work hard to go and learn new skills or, do new programs and think about or read about or research about all these things. And, as a dinosaur or as a slow-moving animal, the university need to be having an overhaul of leadership that will lead them to overhauling their old ideas and preconceptions. And it goes into the system and the status quo that has been happening now. So, Masters of Architecture, it brings in the money for the university also. But at the end of the day, the universities would be concerned about professional courses. Never mind architecture, other professional courses as well. And how, when things are changing in society, when architecture's role is changing in society, and the way we need to change as well the architecture education system. The reason for all this is to actually come out with a new curriculum that doesn't have to deal with another theoretical course or another course that is unique to take in architecture school, which is the Masters of Architecture course at the moment. We can just do what we are exploring of late since 2018, when Architecture Registration Board of the UK mentioned about first degree, and then the theory is the first 3 years, and then you have a couple of years of training, then you can take your part 3. So thinking along those lines and why this proposal came out, at first I was thinking I was against that. But then of seeing evidence of how our students of architecture flourish even without the masters, we decided to investigate further based on success stories, based on 31-year-olds that are doing very well. From a country like Malaysia, they are international standard, or they are plying their trade internationally. And we want to get to the bottom of this. I did mention that there could be interviews with these people. That, is it true? You would want to know too. Did that magic formula that I had talked about in the last 2 series or 2 parts of the series, I'm claiming that there is a magic formula for success based on just a 3-year degree. So, of course, if I were to interview them, they would state other things for inspiration, But I'm going to put out even more a proposition here in this particular episode of what exactly the training or the learning experience for the second year student who are 21-year-old, 21, 22, and which would be a springboard for their success. I will tell you exactly. I mentioned it in part 2. I mentioned it in passing. But I'm going to tell specifically important ones, specific ones. Now, this is also to do with my learning experience as I develop myself in teaching. And one of the greatest thing is case studies, visiting a building or visiting a context where there are people and buildings. Observation needed to be done. It could be participant observation or direct observation. These are things that you can find in research skills or research methods. Under participation observation, you are a participant using that facility. Under direct observation, you think of a theory or you think of a set of rules or guidance, and then when you start observing, you base your understanding based on that set of rules. The best would be participant observation because you are a user, and if possible, you're really using that. You use it for a long time. Number 2 is that curiosity and wonderment that one needs to have. Learning about a few things. One actually set out and visit the place or live in that place for a few months maybe. Like what they did, the student of architecture, they went to Bandung for a week or so. They were immersed in the culture and understanding people, observing them. And it wasn't too, shall we say, prescriptive what they have to do. Go about interviewing people, find out what they think about the site. Because it is something far away, even if it was something in Malaysia, which is out of the city, because the curiosity and wonderment is important. Next to happiness, one needs to have a sense of curiosity and wonder of the world. At the age of 21 and 22, how does that be in that stream that you want them to be in, to be having the skills and knowledge in architecture? We're not saying that we're going to teach them filmmaking. Yeah, it is architecture. And people say that, yeah, it has been quoted that architecture is the mother of all arts. I think that comes from the Renaissance period, when the architect like Michelangelo and Bromini and a load of other guys there during the Renaissance time were also stonemasons, different sort of craft work, jewelry making and metal worker. They were able to do a diverse set of skills that they have in their capacity. And they were working in the context of that time, obviously, with the patronage system. And there's a limited amount of funds, and they want to make a profit as well. But when you read about them in books, that's how it was done. That's a traditional architectural basis of the education, which of course changed later in the Bauhaus period and the Beaux-Arts, before that the Bauhaus period in the last century. Having said that idea that architects are craftsmen, that architects produce things, that architect can be fashion designers, that architect can be filmmakers and artists, obviously, or that the architect can do product as well, and other sort of design disciplines. So we are training architects. We're not training uh, designers of uh, the other route. We're not training project managers. We're not training engineers. But we tend to want to go into building and the object. We're not dealing with anthropology as such as we should. We're not dealing on arts and humanities as much as we should. When we study architectural history, we get any person to teach it, because I did that, who is not a historian. So someone who comes from an architectural background, not a historian, would teach architecture history in terms of styles, in terms of aesthetics, would pick up those books that deal with it that way. Would not be someone who studied anthropology, would not be someone who is a historian that has to study about building construction in terms of history. So in a way, we are so compartmentalized that when we teach students of architecture in terms of theory, they go to sleep. It's just not relevant to them. They don't give a hoot why they need to study architectural history, because it's just trying to memorize Roman columns and stuff like that. It's not interesting. Nothing at all. I did several videos and posted them in my YouTube channel, and they were lectures that I did during the MCO pandemic period. The students of architecture very few of them would check them out in the YouTube channel. But it became so relevant for those who are practicing, those who are just a few years out after graduation, because it's a refresher course. So, it's two things, one theory and one practice. And can we have them both in the teaching of architecture design studio? It's not formulaic, it's not application, it is origination, it is innovation. And we talk about Bloom's taxonomy and the learning, what do you call it? Taxonomy, of course, the learning outcomes of when we create curriculums. So we talk about that. What does that mean in terms of architecture education? Going back to the first formula, case studies. Case studies would bring the attention of the student to a whole background story of a complex narrative of architecture that just does not come out from a sketchbook. Architecture is about the people. Architecture is about people using the space, about the failings as well as the good aspects of the design. As well, not only of design, but operations and services that accompany the design, depending on the building type. So if you do a case study of a hospital, or you to do a case study of a clinic or a library, it's really the essential things that you need to know when you do a building type, to understand the concepts relating to that particular building type, of what is a dwelling, for example, for housing, and how do you actually create the house to be something inspirational, because it is the thing that you wake up to in the morning, your bedroom and the living spaces and the in-between spaces, the complex housing examples, and how you have to identify which rooms are more important than the other rooms. You take a stand, you make a judgment. And how do you make this stand and judgment? It's through your observation. A lot of disciplines, a lot of professional courses depend on observational skills, obviously. If you were learning to be medical officer or a doctor. There is diagnoses that you need to do based on observations, obviously. It's quite specific to medicine in the sense that you're dealing with medicine. You're dealing with from a situation that the patient is having pain to a situation where the person is not having pain. How are you going to do that? Even in mental health as well. So that there's some form of normalcy or normal living or independent living that the person could have. And it will cost less because the healing process make them able to do the things that they need to do, go to school, go to work, and so on, right? Or take care of other people. So we know about medicine, but what about architecture? What about architecture? It's not like medicine. The ability for the architect to participate in the life that he or she going to create for the community, if it's a community center or it has sports facilities or is a library, the ability for the architect actually understand how the spaces could be inspirational needs to have some sort of a case study. They could visit places. That's what they did in Bandung. They visited micro libraries. They visited the university's libraries. But the understanding of the people helped them to actually narrate or tell a story as well through their work. The ability to actually make sense of something themselves rather than someone else telling them to do it. A bit of, letting the baby just go and swim for the first time by just throwing them into the swimming pool sort of thing happens, but you'd want to be there to see they don't drown, obviously. But what would you do? You follow them and you said, notice that, notice this. And it'd be good if you could sketch that because, by sketching it, like a detail of the bracket system or the joints at the roof to the column, would help them have a sense of a knowledge to start off understanding structure. Then they make sense about the whole structure from that joint. Will the part inform the whole through a case study? And you need to ask those questions when you have a crit with them. What do you learn from your trip? What do you learn from your case studies? And there could be a group discussion rather than just one-to-one on that. It helps because there is some sort of a collaboration happening when there are more than one person in terms of collaboration of understanding the knowledge and wanting to know further. And if you don't have the expert with you, find the expert to give a better understanding to the problem. Hence, we come to why case studies are important. It is understanding the problem. A lot of us talk about what's the design problem, but students of architecture at the 5th year level even confuse themselves about this. When you say design intention, design problem, what's the difference between the two? Do you need to know the design problem before you have a design intention? Maybe that's the correct sequence of events, because if you start out to do a scheme, start out to design something, learning from a case study that you visited, you could actually have both things happening at the same time. When you were sketching on site, you identified the design problem, which is from the typology of the building, the case study that you have observed through your sketches. And that sort of design problem could be something that inspired your design intention, obviously. I saw that people attracted to the water body and a lot of activities around it. So, is that a problem? So when you talk about design problem, you talk about how your hypothesis comes out of that. That could be the problem of volume, space, or detail with regard to this water body. But you're not going to redesign the same thing as a case study, but you notice that that is an issue with that type of building. It is a good thing, and yet it's not a good thing. So you want to introduce a water body in your polyclinic, for example. What would that do? People would say, oh, it's dirty, it's unkempt, but the water body would help with the ventilation or the cooling effect at the hall, and what you design, because of the design problem, what is it about the water body that you see people are attracted to? There are activities, people actually bathe in them, and they are part of the system, the canal system, or the water system of the village. What would that do in the polyclinic aspect? Would the polyclinic be like part of the village? Would it be like something that introduce a design element that makes sense? So then when you think about the clinic, you think about people coming in to get well or to see the doctor. You could also think about people waiting, because there's always many family members or one or two that accompany the sick person. And also you think about how you want to break down the elements so that people find waiting at the area to, the outside area before you go to see into the clinic proper would be much more open, so that children can run around screaming there and be still safe. And it sort of give a sense of comfort, perhaps. Is that water body in the village? I'm talking about what I saw in the village that we did, the Bandung project, that there was a water body. That's why I'm thinking about it. Not necessarily that students of architecture picked it up. Maybe they did, but I'm just talking about that because why is that comforting? Why is it naturally comforting for a community? Because I don't see that in my community. And I obviously my community is where I'm at. It's just kind of like condominiums, or it's kind of, it's not so much naturally occurring. I don't see water bodies a lot in the community, in the urban community. And you don't see swimming pools. You don't have access to swimming pools so much. There is probably one in the condominium, but it's not that accessible. It's not like an element that is creating, shall we say, a glue or a sense of identity in terms of giving a sense of community or people drawn to it. It's not nice. It's not nicely designed. So there's so many things happening at that time when you do a case study and you visit places. And the tutor would be observant and be part of the process, collaborating with you to kind of be in wonderment themselves. And because they have this understanding of giving a learning experience for the students, they quickly would point out that this is kind of an interesting thing here. I've been before where as a tutor, I kind of like stuck for words or, needing some text or needing some background to somewhere I visited. But tutors would learn after a while that if they're going to be with students, they're going to be in a sense of wonder like themselves and ask questions and even ask the students what they think of it and have a conversation. Having conversations because you're going to visit a case study, visit a place, having conversation with others, is a sign of confidence by the tutors themselves. And the students can gain that confidence with themselves, asking questions and having a discussion there and then with the tutors. Because, this going to another place, another country, another town, you can be just a tourist. The tutors set the tone for the students to pick up whether it is the world is your oyster, and the world can tell you stuff. And by talking to people with the right, we give some tips on how to approach people and have a chat with people, because it is a life, shall we say, a life skill. I mean, if you want to be a tutor, you'd want to be someone who can chat with other people as well, because you have learned research skills to be a participant observer in a case study setting. The case studies are so important. Case studies, if students go and do their own case studies, you'd want to have a conversation with them. You're not there with them. You'd want to have a conversation based on their observations, sketches or photographs that they take, and making a report out of it. You'd want to ask questions. And sometimes the student go and visit it again because they were curious what you said. The sort of questions that came out of the conversation after they talked to you. The curiosity part is the magic formula. You'd want the student of architecture to be curious about life, about architecture, about the site, about the case studies. The case studies potentially have so much powerful messages and learning experience. And if you do a specific case study, just say an elderly person in an old folks' home, and the student of architecture have to actually kind of help that elderly person to design their own elderly or retirement home, they actually had to understand through that person, through the elderly person that they interview and observe, they would come up with a better understanding. So anthropology and sociology is very much part of architecture learning courses. Why second year? The thing is, people will say, oh yeah, we do that. But in the 5th year, in the 4th year, in the 3rd year, why don't you do it in the 2nd year? That is the most impressionable time. That one, the 1st year, 2nd year, and 3rd year, the 2nd year, when you experience in the first, you start them young. I mean, if I had a chance to do a 1st year course, I'd do the same thing. I'd focus on the magic formula. The earlier they are, even in secondary school, the earlier, I know they don't take architecture, but having that sort of wonderment and curiosity that young people could approach life, approach learning, is the right formula. It's the correct formula. It's not magic anymore. It's purposeful. It's necessary. It's compulsory. It is the thing to go. And what more of you an architecture student, to me, is really whatever curriculum that you have out there, it's got to be inspirational. If you collaborate, you're a studio tutor, you're a studio master, you collaborate with the other studio tutors with the same philosophy, with the same ideas, communicate with them that we need to create this feeling of wonderment and curiosity with the students. This collaboration would benefit the communication between the tutors themselves. So, leadership in a department is so important that you actually get your tutors to be cooperative or collaborative with each other. So those are also important things. But eventually, for the sustainability of the what do you call it, the department, the School of Architecture. I'm sure there are schools of architecture out there doing successful work where the tutors are doing their own thing and doing their own team and creating learning programs separately than the other lecturers. But there are universities or there are departments that you have to work with others that you don't choose. But to be on the same boat, to be on the same objective is so important in collaboration work. And students pick it up. Students can see whether the tutors are collaborating with each other. And when I think about my employment as a lecturer before, I wish that there's a better leadership in the faculty so that tutors can collaborate better with each other and on the same, shall we say, the same agenda and it's almost the same philosophy. And that's really it. That's the magic formula, the case studies. Because from that, you can have all these three skills of observational skills, analytical skills, and critical thinking. And the dialogue and conversation that is around that in the crit. And having inspirational programs and getting the right sort of community building, such as library or polyclinics, and having also going to see a lot of examples of the culture or the people that you're visiting is necessary. That is an investment. We did that, and that's an investment that bear fruits to the nation years later. You can't evaluate that at that time. Education is like that. The type of people or the person who's confident comes from many experiences, but that is springboard at the age of 21, 22. The purpose of being an architect or any career that you're going to make out of this experience being learning architecture, because the learning experience is for those with the arts and humanities bent. And architecture, the root of it is arts and humanities. Some of them decided to go into science later on. You can learn about science in the practical training. You can learn about those things you can pick up in details, applications. In this day and age, where would architecture want to be at? You could, if you're a person thinking about the fate of architecture and architects, in this day and age, where would architecture want to be at? So in the next episode, which is not to be the same title as this, it'll be the propose of a curriculum that's only for 3 years, based on what I know from my previous employment and how you can have the 3 years curriculum for the first degree and then 2 years practical training leading up to the professional accreditation. And we know that professional practice is about contracts and it's about business. And after 3 years, those who want to do architecture, they go into that. So what happens on the third year? Can we learn from case studies to do an architectural research that is also an architectural project. And the repetition of the courses in terms of collaboration, I mean, the courses you can learn about this building type, that building type, you know. Why do we learn about housing? Why do we learn about office buildings? Why do we learn about mechanics? Why do we learn about M&E and electricals? You know, the applications. Or what do we need to know to the extent that we can understand the integration of building design with the technicalities and putting things together? How we want to learn that, and how is it we're going to show that we can do that? Of course, designing details, right? Detailed design, the ability to do detailed design. So in that 3 years, if the student of architecture have the ability to actually do detailed design in several types of materials and constructions, how are you going to put it in the curriculum? Should it be part of the studio or separate? So when you think about practice and how there are different processes, right? So anyway, it's getting to be a long episode now. Just giving you some ideas and thoughts. So I'm going to stop it here, and I will go into detail about the new curriculum at this day and age. Thank you very much.